Hello, toe beans, and welcome to my first whip and crime. So, I'm in Iron obviously on this one for a while, as you know. I've mentioned it a few times, and no one's said anything about maybe not doing it. So I'm just gonna try a couple and see how it goes. Sorry, I am munching on sweets. I've got a tea, and I'm gonna do for my first whip and crime is Jack the Ripper. Yeah, so you have to bear with me because I'm going to try to do a bit of diamond painting. I put small sections. I don't know how much of it I'm going to get done during this. I've got my laptop to the side to do that one as well, to get the information. So I just hope you guys can bear with me. I am using my Baby Yoda tray. I just put that too high up, sorry. Which does come with a little trash tray, just to show you what I'm using. I'm using a pen from Record Art. Sorry, bring it down a bit more. Is there blurring still? Sorry. From Record Art. That's this pen. This is called Romantic Blue. It has got paddy wax in there, but I do have my putty to the side just in case. And I've got tweezers in case I decide to start using those. So yeah, oh, and I'm using my 56 storage pots with the top row has the little pots and my bottom row has my big pots. So I'm really sorry. This is my first whip and crime. I'm a bit nervous because I've never had to read from a laptop while filming before, so this is the first time. All right, let me just straighten this up a little bit because I don't want to go all over the place with it. There, that looks a bit better. There we are. Does that look a bit straighter? No, it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't cut these, but I just feel like they're not as straight as they should be. There we go, from line to line. There we are. That's straighter. So sorry. So, as I said, we are starting with Jack the Ripper. Oh, why am I getting P out? I'm going to get 9 out. This is a Dreamer Designs canvas. I am working on Yoshi the Shiba. I wanted something bright and colourful. There's a diamond in there that shouldn't be in there. Yep. I am working on Yoshi the Shiba. I thought nice colourful with a bit of crime, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so we are starting with Jack the Ripper. One, because he's like the biggest serial killer known in British history. And I am in the UK, so I wanted to at least start with one from my own home turf. Obviously, I will be doing others as well. So, bear with me. So, Jack the Ripper, I'm reading from my laptop a case file. There's so much information, so you have to bear with me. I'm probably going to have to click other links to get a bit more information on each thing that comes up. So, Jack the Ripper murders occurred in East London, the East End of London, which is like Whitechapel area, in 1888. So we're looking like really historic. I'm a big history buff, so naturally I wanted to start with something that's kind of a passion that I've already had. And although the Whitechapel murders was only a threat to a very small section of the community in the relatively small part of London, the crimes had a huge impact on the society as a whole. So I'm imagining there's a lot of case files on this. This isn't the one I used when I was in high school, so we're just gonna have to go with the flow on this one. Obviously, the one that I used in high school still isn't around, so I'm going with what I can find. If anyone has any other places to get it from, let me know. So, indeed, by focusing the attention of the press and the public at large on the streets and people of one of London's poorest and most crime-ridden quarters, Jack the Ripper, however, he may have been managed to expose the sordid underbelly of the Victorian society, and in so doing he helped create an awareness amongst the wealthiest citizens of London of the appalling social conditions that had been allowed to develop largely unchecked right on the doorsteps of the City of London, the wealthiest square mile on earth. Okay, sorry. So, obviously, those of you that probably already know, Jack the Ripper was never caught. Now, no one knows what. Oh, gosh. See, I told you it's going to be a slow one. Hopefully. I don't know how much of this section I'm going to get done. Sorry. Jack the Ripper was never caught. So, there are a lot of suspicions on who he was. Everyone has a theory, I guess. And, yeah. So, the next part is... Wait, sorry. I'm trying to flick down as we go. Okay, so we've got Jack the Ripper victims. How many victims were there? One of the problems with asserting the exact number of victims. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm not used to reading at the same time as trying to do this, so please bear with me. If I pronounce anything wrong, I'm sorry. Should have said that to begin with. And my words may get a little jumbled, but I will keep persisting through. This is only my first one. Should get better as time goes on. Anyway, certainly exact number of victims Jack the Ripper is the fact that he was never caught. So it is difficult to know an exact number of victims. The generic Whitechapel's murder files, the official name for the police investigation into the crimes, contains the 11 victims. 11 victims, and it is generally believed that 5 of these were the work of the killer known as Jack the Ripper. Would have helped if I picked up a diamond. However, it should be stressed that the idea of there being a so-called canonical 5 victims is by no means certain. Indeed, many experts will tell you that there may have been as few as 4 victims or as many as 8 victims of the Ripper. Okay. The list below is broken down. Okay, so the 5 official victims are August the 31st of 1888 is Mary Nicholas, murdered in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. Let's click on that one and read on that one. Sorry. Okay, so finding the body sorry, you're going to see my hand, sorry. At 3:30 a.m. 3:30 a.m. on August the 31st, 1888, Charles Cross left his home in Doverton Street, Bethnal Green, and set off to walk to his place of work at Pickford's near Liverpool Street, where he was employed as a carman or a delivery driver. Oh, I got P in here. Yes, I do. I feel like I should just give up with the whip, but I'm going to keep trying. Heading along Brady Street, he turned into Bucks Row and commenced walking along its right side. I want to take a little break to just try and get some diamonds down. As he approached the looming bulk of the 1879 board school, which dominated and still dominates the western end of the first section of Bucks Row, he noticed a dark bundle lying in a gateway on the opposite side of the street. As many of the district's thoroughfares, street lighting in Bucks Row was minimal, so at first Cross could not be sure exactly what the bundle was. It looked something like a discarded terrapin. That's what it says, yes? Yes. or tarpaulin. Tarpaulin. And so, thinking that it might prove useful for his job, Cross went to inspect it. And we're getting there. But as he drew closer, he realised that in fact it was a prone form of a woman who was either dead or drunk, and he stopped in his tracks. Okay. Guys, if this ends up being really long, I will make it in parts. Okay, don't worry. As Cross stood... Sorry, I'm still fighting off my infection of the throat infection, but I want to get this done. As Cross stood rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do next, he heard footsteps approaching from the direction that he had just come from. Okay. Turning, he saw another carter, Robert Paul, walking towards him. "Come and look over here," Cross called. There was a woman lying on the pavement. How on earth did they know that he called to someone? It must be somewhere in the case file, I guess. Okay. The two men stepped over the road and stomped down over the figure. Sorry, my eyes have been a bit funny. She was lying on her back, her legs were straight out and her skirts were raised almost over her waist. Oh, jeez. Charles Cross reached out and touched her face, which was warm, and her hands, which were cold and limp. "I believe she's dead," he observed. Robert Paul meanwhile placed his hand on the woman's chest and thought he felt a slight movement. "I think she's breathing," he said, "but very little if she is." Paul suggested that they sit the woman up, but Cross refused to touch her again, so deciding perhaps somewhat callously that they were late for work and had done as much as they could, they pulled her skirts back down to her knees to cover her decency and set off for their prospective places of employment, agreeing to tell the first policeman that they encountered what they found. Well, I don't know how they know this. Maybe someone went back and... I don't know. But what neither man had noticed in the pitch darkness of Bucks Row was that the woman's throat had been slashed so savagely that, according to some newspaper reports, her head had almost been severed from her body. So how did he feel her breathing then? Does that even make sense? He said he thought she was breathing, but her head had been pretty much detached. How? Okay. PC Neil arrives at the scene. That discovery was made by a beat officer, police constable John Neal, who turned into Bucks Row and proceeded to walk past the board school shortly after Cross and Paul had left the scene. So, I guess back then police were pretty common to walk around the place. Is that right? I don't know. There was not a soul about, he later told the inquest into the woman's death. "I'd been around there for half an hour previously and saw no one then. I was on the right side, then I noticed a figure lying in the street. It was dark at the time. I examined the body by the aid of my lamp and noticed blood oozing from the wound in the throat. She was lying on her back and her clothes disarranged. I felt her arm, which was quite warm from the joint upwards. Her eyes were wide open and her bonnet was off and lying at her side." That's not very good, is it? How could she feel warm? I'm pretty sure that when you pass away, your body goes cold. I might be wrong. As Neil stooped down over the body, he noticed PC John Thane passing the end of the street and flushed his lantern to attract his attention. There's a woman with her throat cut, he called to his approaching colleague. Okay, well, that's a bit on the nose. Run at once for Dr. Llewellyn. I'm hoping I said that right too. As Thane hurried off to fetch the medic, PC Mizine, I think that's how you pronounce it, who had been alerted by Cross and Paul, arrived at the scene. Neil sent him to bring reinforcement and asked him to also fetch the police ambulance. Okay. See, I don't know. I don't know already. The guy said he didn't see anyone, but there were 2 other people, and it said shortly after them, but he said he'd been there for half an hour. How did you not see them? Okay. Dr. Llewellyn arrives at around 4 a.m. and carried out a coarsely examination of the body, noting the severity of the wounds into the throat. He pronounced life extinct. So he said that she was dead, so no one, how people feel in her grave is beyond me. On a closer examination, he also observed that the deceased's body and legs were still warm, although her hands and wrists were quite cold. This led him to summarise that she could not have been dead for more than half an hour. So that means that she died literally just as those other 2 had got there. That's why she was still warm. Sorry, I thought I misplaced it. This I don't know about or not. In fact, this observation by the doctor suggests that the murderer may have well still been at the scene when Charles Cross came strolling along Bucks Row on his way to work. As Llewellyn went about his grim business, news of the murder was beginning to filter through the immediate neighbourhood. Sorry. I have to move my thing down to get the rest, sorry. In adjacent Winthrop Street, there stood a horse slaughter's yard, where 3 slaughtermen, Harry Tompkins, James Mumford, and Charles Britton. I don't know, it's Britten. Britton, I think that's how. I don't know. Britton had been working throughout the night. They had heard nothing and knew nothing of the murder until informed of it by PC Thane, as he passed their premises en route to fetch Dr. Llewellyn. They'd gone around to view the body and remained at the scene until the woman was removed to the mortuary. The 3 men would later find themselves under suspicion and were interrogated separately by the police before being eliminated as suspects. They were joined at the murder site by Patrick Mulshaw, a night watchman who was working at a nearby sewer works. Although he did confess that he sometimes dozed on duty, he was emphatic that he had been awake between 3 and 4 and had not seen or heard anything suspicious. But at around 20 minutes to 5, a passing stranger had told him, "Watchman, old man, I believe somebody is murdered down the street." And he immediately went to Bucks Row. The police appear to have made attempts to trace Mulshaw's mystery informant, but their inquiries proved unsuccessful. So could the guy that said something be what they put as Jack? I guess. Could have been. Before we go on to the body being moved, it has a timeline of her life. Mary Nicholas's life timeline. She was born in 1845. Born Mary Walker in London. In 1864, she married William Nicholas, which is why her last name is Nicholas. In 1866, she had her first child, Edward John Nicholas, and in 1868, she had her second child, Percy George Nicholas. In 1870, her third child, Alice Esther Nicholas, was born. 1877, she began to drink quite heavily, and had left home on several occasions. Also in 1877, she had another daughter, Eliza Sarah Nicholas, was born. And then in 1879, she had a son, Henry Alfred Nicholas. In 1880, the couple had separated and the children remained with their father. On the 6th of September 1880 to the 31st of May 1881, she was a resident at Lambeth Workhouse. 1882, her husband learnt that she was working as a prostitute and stopped paying her a maintenance allowance. She issued a summons for a non-payment but lost her cause on account of her immoral lifestyle. On the 24th of April 1882 to the 18th of January 1883, she re-entered Lambeth Workhouse as a resident. On the 18th of January 1883 to the 20th of January 1883, so 2 days later, she was a patient at Lambeth Infirmary. Oh, that doesn't sound good. From the 20th of January till the 24th of March, she went back to residing in Lambeth Workhouse. Then from 24th of March till the 21st of May, she lived with her father until her reclusive drinking led to friction between them. Following an argument, she moved out. Then on the 21st of May to the 2nd of June, she returned to Lambeth Workhouse as a resident. 2nd of June 1883 to 25th of October 1887, she lived with Thomas Stewart Drew at 15 York Street, Walworth. Then October to December, she may have been one of the many of the homeless who were sleeping rough in Trafalgar Square. Mary Ann Nicholas appeared at Bow Street Court on charges of being homeless, but did not know for certain whether this was her. So I don't know if that's the same Mary or not. 19th of December 1887 to 29th, she returned to Lambeth Workhouse. Then on the 4th of January 1888 to 16th of April 1888, she was a resident at Mitcham Workhouse, Holborn. I guess that was in Holborn? Okay. From the 16th of April to the 12th of July, she was employed as a live-in servant by Mr. and Mrs. Cowdry of Wandsworth. She was sacked for stealing some clothing. 1st of August to the 2nd of August, she slept in Gray's Inn Room Workhouse. 2nd of August to the 24th of August, she shared a room in a common lodging house at 18 Thrall Street, Spitalfields. She shared a bed with Ellen Holland. On the 24th to the 30th, she lodged at the White House on 56 Flower and Dean Street. Then the 30th at 11:30, she was seen walking along Chapel Road. Then at 12:30, she was seen leaving the Frying Pan pub at junction of Thrall Street and Brick Lane. At 1:20 a.m, she turned up at a lodging house, but was turned away because she didn't have money for a bed. Then at 2:30, Emily Holland met her the worse for drink at the junction of Osborne Street and Whitechapel High Street. Mary boasted that she had made her DOS money 3 times over, but had spent it. She refused to go back to the lodging house in Thrall Street, and the two parted. Then at 3:40 a.m, Charles Cross was making his way to work and he found her body. Wow. Wow. Just wow. Sorry. So there was that. I'm going to try and get at least all of the 5 victims that it says here. We got September the 8th, 1888. Annie Chapman murdered in Hanbury Street, Spitalfields. Sorry for any pronunciation, that's wrong. Okay, Jack the Ripper's second victim. Should we look at her timeline first and then read her story? Yeah, I guess we'll just read the timeline first. Makes it a little easier. Kind of gives you a little bit of a bearing on who she is, I guess. So she was born in September 1841. She was Eliza Ann Smith in Paddington, London. Then in 1856, the family moved to Windsor. The 1st of May in 1869, she married John Chapman at All Saints Church in Knightsbridge. 1869 to 1881, she lived in West London. In 1870, she has a daughter, Emily Ruth Chapman. Then in 1873, her second daughter was born, Annie Georgia Chapman. In 1880, I'm just reading it from here, sorry guys. A son, John Alfred Chapman, was born. Sadly, John was a cripple and was put into a home. Oh, that's sad. In 1881, the family moved back to Windsor. 1882, their eldest daughter, Emily Ruth Chapman, died. And then both Annie... I'm so sorry, hold on. I'm so sorry, someone had knocked on a neighbour's door and now Ruby thought it was a good time to bark. Where was I? Both Annie and John now started drinking heavily. Well, I guess that's how some people deal with loss of a child. Where are we? 1884 or 1885, the couple separated and Annie returned to live in London. John off and on continued to support her with a sporadic allowance of 10 shillings a week. Wow. In 1886, Annie took up with a sieve maker by the name John Civey. And the couple moved into a common lodging house at 35 Dorset Street. Okay. 25th. On Christmas Day of 1886, John died of... I can't pronounce that one, so sorry, but something's wrong with his liver. And thereafter, the allowance ceased. Oh, her first husband. He died of a liver problem and she didn't get an allowance anymore. In January of 1887, Sevey broke off their relationship and moved back to Notting Hill. From May of 1888, Annie was an almost permanent resident at Crossingham's lodging house. Then in June to September of 1888, Annie was involved in a relationship with Edward Stanley, a bricklayer's assistant of 1 Osborne Place, Whitechapel. The couple would spend weekends together at Crossingham's lodging house. Okay. I'm trying to get this done too, don't worry. Okay. On August the 6th of 1888, Stanley went away and was gone for the rest of the month. Late August, she met her brother, Fountain Smith, on Commercial Road, Whitechapel, and told him that she was hard up. She refused to tell him where she was living. He gave her 2 shillings. That's nice of him. September the 1st, Stanley returned to the area and met her at the corner of Brushfield Street. Okay. I'm pretty sure these streets don't have the same names today. Something worth looking into. Early September, Annie had a fight with a fellow lodger, Eliza Cooper, and was left with a black eye and a bruising to the chest. September the 3rd, Amelia Palmer met her in Dorset Street and commented on her black eye and bruised right temple. Annie opened her dress and showed her the bruising on her chest. She told Amelia that she was feeling unwell and that she might go and see her sister to get a pair of boots so that she can go hop picking. Okay. September the 4th, Amelia Palmer met her again near Christchurch on Commercial Street. Annie complained of feeling extremely unwell and said that she might go to the casual ward for a few days to recover. She mentioned that she had not had anything to eat or drink all day, and Amelia gave her 2p, warning her not to spend it on rum. On September the 7th, 1888, 5 p.m, Amelia Palmer met her again, this time on Dorset Street. Annie told her that she was too ill to do anything. Palmer left, but then she returned, and a short time later to find Annie was still there. Annie told her that she must do something to get some money or she would have no lodgings. Then at 11:30 p.m, Annie turned up at the Crossingham's lodging house on Dorset Street and asked if she could sit in the kitchen. The request was granted. At 1:30 a.m, she went to the office of the deputy lodging housekeeper, Timothy Donovan, and explained that she had no money to pay for her bed for that night. He told her that if she couldn't pay, she couldn't stay, and she left, vowing to return shortly with money and urging them to see that they can keep her bed. At 5:30 a.m, Mrs. Elizabeth Long was walking along Hadbury Street when she passed Annie Chapman talking to a man directly outside number 29 Hadbury Street. She heard the man say, "Will you?" to which Annie replied yes. At 6 a.m, John Davis, the resident of 29 Hadbury Street, found her mutilated body in the backyard of number 29. So he found her in his back garden. Okay, here we go. So the second victim that they've classified, Annie Chapman, 1841 to 1888. That makes her, 47 years old, give or take? I just did that quickly in my head, but I'm not sure if that's 100% right. Sorry. If I got her age wrong, I'm sorry. Led a somewhat nomadic existence around Spitfields. She was 47. Oh, there you go. It says it on there. 47 years old at the time of her death. A short, plump, ashen-faced consumptive who for 4 or so months prior to her death had been living at Crossingham's lodging house at number 35 Dorset Street, where she paid 8p a night for a double bed. Wow. It doesn't sound like a lot, but 8p back then was a lot of money. Like, it's not easy to come by that kind of money then. Not unless you're a royal or something. She appears to have enjoyed a cardinal relationship with other tenants, and the deputy keeper, Timothy Donovan, remembered her as being an inoffensive soul whose main weakness was fondness for drink. Wow, after reading her life story, it kind of makes sense. Like many other women in the area, Annie supplemented a meagre income she obtained from crochet work and making and selling artificial flowers with prostitution. Wow. The way they just threw that in at the end there. She had 2 regular clients known as Harry the Hawker and the other man named Ted Stanley. He was a supposed retired soldier who was known to her fellow lodgers as the pensioner. Okay. So who was the pensioner? As it later transpired, Stanley was neither a retired soldier nor a pensioner, but in fact a bricklayer's labourer who lived at number 1 Osborne Place in Whitechapel. According to Timothy Donovan, Stanley had frequently spent Saturdays to Mondays with Annie at Cressingham's. He also claimed that Stanley had told him to turn Annie away should she ever arrive at the lodging house with other men. Stanley, however, denied this and claimed he had visited Annie only once or twice. Okay. So I'm guessing that meant he was in for the limelight there. An argument at the lodging house. Whatever Annie's relationship with the pensioner, he seemed to have been the cause of the only trouble that Timothy Donovan could remember her being involved in during all her time at Cressingham's. Wow. Sorry, still trying to get some of this done. I can understand why people don't get much done when they're doing these. At some stage in the month before her death, different witnesses remembered different dates. Okay. There had been alterations between Annie and a fellow lodger, Eliza Cooper. The full details of the arguments told by different witnesses were confusing and contradictory, with some even claiming that Harry the Hawker was the cause. Oh gosh. According to Eliza Cooper, in her inquest testimony, she had loaned Annie Chapman a bar of soap, which Annie had given to Ted Stanley, who then went to wash with it. Over the next few days, Eliza asked several times for the return of the soap, only to be dismissed by Annie, who on one occasion tossed her a penny, into the lodging house kitchen table and told her to go and get a halfpenny of soap. Oh, Jesus. So she threw a halfpenny, sorry. The two women met a few days later in a Britannia pub on the eastern corner of Dorset Street. However, on this occasion, Annie slapped Eliza across the face, screaming that as she did so, "Think yourself lucky I don't do more." Eliza retaliated by punching Annie in the eye and then hard across the chest. Annie appears to have come off worse from the exchange of blows, and the bruising she sustained were still evident when Dr. Phillips carried out her post-mortem. Of course, it should have been remembered that this is the account given by Eliza Cooper at Annie Chapman's inquest, and she was no doubt anxious to portray herself as the injured party. Wow, okay. So now she's been beaten up, and we've already heard that she was in pain and didn't think she could do much. So whatever the cause of the argument, Annie Chapman's last days were spent bruised and in pain, her health rapidly failing. Also, she might have popped her lung or something. If you hit in the chest, can't that cause internal issues? On Monday the 3rd of September, when she met her friend Amelia Palmer on Dorset Street, the bruising to her right temple was more than evident. "How did you get that?" Amelia Palmer asked. Annie's response was to open her dress and show her the bruising on her chest. Well, I mean, I know women aren't always shy, but still, opening your dress up? Amelia bumped into Annie again the next day, close to Spitalfields Church, and commented on how pale she looked. Annie told her that she felt no better and she might admit herself to the casual ward for a few days. When Amelia asked if she had had anything to eat that day, Annie replied, "No, I haven't had a cup of tea today." Amelia handed her 2 pence to buy some food and warned her not to spend it on rum. Talking of tea, I'm gonna have some. Sorry, I have my microphone in, so if you heard that, I'm really sorry. And then 3 days later, at around 5 p.m. on the 7th of September, Amelia saw Annie in Dorset Street. She looked even worse and complained of feeling too ill to do anything. She was still standing in the same place when Amelia passed her again 10 minutes later. Though she was now trying desperately to rally her spirits, "It's no use giving away. I must pull myself together and get some money or I shall have no lodgings," were the last words that Amelia Palmer heard Annie Chapman speak. Okay. So it's still on her body thing. Oh, should I have read the other article? I changed articles on this one just to read this, but sorry. It had like the other woman's funeral and stuff. If you want to hear that, I'll do a different video for different one for that. Okay, I'm just gonna finish up on poor Annie, and then I will leave it there for today, and we'll do another one another day. I think this is gonna be in parts, mostly because I'm not a quick reader, and I am clicking links to see things. But if you wanted to get the other information about Mary, I will go back and do that, don't worry. I'll do that before I do this, the rest of this one. Okay, so a little before 6 a.m, John Davis, an elderly resident at 29 Hadbury Street, came downstairs, walked along the narrow passageway and opened the back door. The sight that met his eyes sent him reeling back in horror. A moment later, two workmen walking along Hadbury Street were suddenly startled when from the open door of 29, a wide-eyed old man came stumbling into the street. "Men," he cried, "come here." Nervously, they followed him along the passageway, looking into the backyard. They saw the mutilated body of Annie Chapman lying on the ground between the steps and the wooden fence. Her head was turned towards the house, and her clothes had been tugged up above her waist, exposing her red and white striped stockings. Wow. So this guy has no care for women, by the way. Like, if he's leaving their skirts that high up, he obviously has no care for women. That's what I'm getting from that now. A handkerchief was tied around her throat. She had been wearing this when her killer cut her throat, and had it not... Sorry, let me try that again. The handkerchief was tied around her throat, in brackets. She had been wearing this when the killer cut her throat, and it had not, as had often been asserted, been tied by her murderer to stop the head from rolling away. Jesus. Her face and hands were covered in blood, and her hands were raised and bent with the palms towards the upper portion of her body, giving James Kent the impression that she had been struggling and fought for her throat. Where am I? Sorry, I still want to get some diamonds on. After a few moments of stunned silence, the three men sprang into action and, racing out of the house, set off in different directions to find a policeman. The horror of what he had witnessed immediately began to sink in with James Kent, causing him to abandon his search and go instead for a brandy to steady his nerves. Wow. So respectful. Henry Holland raced up to the commercial street and headed across to Spitalfields Market, where he encountered a constable on fixed point duty. Holland panted out the news of their find and was somewhat taken aback when the officer curtly informed him that it was against procedure for him to leave his post. He was so angered by the officer's officious attitude that he later made an official complaint to the Commercial Street Police Station, only to be told that the officer had been correct to follow procedure and not leave his post. Damn. So I found a dead body. Oh, I can't leave here. That's not nice. John Davis, meanwhile, had headed to Commercial Street Police Station, bursting through the doors breathlessly, demanding to see a senior officer. Moments later, Inspector Joseph Chandler was hurrying along the Commercial Street. Turning along Hadbury Street, he forced his way through the spectators who were already gathering at the passage of number 29. He ordered that the local proximity to be cleared of all sightseers, and then sent the constable back to Commercial Street Police Station, instructing him to bring as many reinforcements as possible in order that the crowds might be contained. Another officer was dispatched to fetch Dr. George Bagster Phillips, the divisional police surgeon. Okay. Chandler then inquired some sacking from one of the neighbours and used it to cover... Oh, sacking, as in actual sacking. Okay, cool. And used it to cover the body until the arrival of the police surgeon. By the time Phillips arrived, it was around 6:30, and the crowd outside the house was some several hundred strong. Jeez. Casting a curiosity glance down at the body, it was more than obvious to him that the woman was beyond medical help. His testimony at the inquest did record this is what he saw. Oh, Lord. Sorry. Left arm was placed across the left breast. The legs were drawn up and feet resting on the ground and knees turned outwards. Face was swollen and turned on the right side. The tongue protruded between front teeth but not beyond the lips. Tongue evidently was much swollen. Front teeth were perfect as far as the first molar. Top and bottom were very fine teeth. They were. The body was terribly mutilated. The stiffness of the limbs was not marked, but was evidently commencing. He noticed that the throat was cut deeply, that the incisions through the skin were jagged and reached right around the neck on the wooden paling between the yard and in question and the next. Smears of blood corresponding to where the head of the deceased lay were to be seen. These were about 14 inches from the ground and immediately above the part where the blood from the neck lay. That's what he said. Okay. That's his official quote, apparently. Later that day, the post-mortem would reveal that the killer had cut out Annie Chapman's womb and had gone off with it. But at that hour of the morning, there was little more that Dr. Phillips could do at the scene, so having pronounced the woman dead, he ordered that she be removed to Whitechapel Workhouse Infirmary in Eagle Street off Old Montague Street. Okay. The body is taken to the mortuary. Watching by the crowd, a battered coffin was carried from the building placed onto the police ambulance, which set off eastwards along Brick Lane, Hadbury Street, then turned right onto Brick Lane. What? Okay. A little before 7 a.m, it pulled up outside the mortuary gates where Robert Mann, whose unauthorised stripping and washing of the body of Mary Nicholas was, no doubt, still fresh in the minds of the police that was waiting to receive it. Yeah, maybe I should have read the rest of hers. When the Inspector Chandler turned up a few moments later, he took one look at Mann and made it clear that nobody was to touch the corpse until Dr. Phillips had completed his post-mortem examination. Satisfied that his instructions had been understood, Chandler placed PC Barnes in charge and headed back to the Commercial Street Police Station. Both he and Dr. Phillips were furious to later discover that within 2 hours of his departure, 2 nurses acting on instructions from the clerk of the warehouse guardians had once more stripped and washed the body before the post-mortem could be carried out. Oh wow, that's definitely not good. Okay, so maybe we should just quickly do the rest of Mary Nicholas's, just so that we can finish off the rest of hers before anything else. So we read all of hers. At the bottom, we got when she was moved to the mortuary, Mary Nicholas's body was moved to the mortuary. Dr. Llewellyn was now becoming a little disconcerted at the number of sightseers that were arriving at the scene. He had ordered that the body to be removed to the mortuary where he would make a further examination. Thane and Neil lifted the body into the police ambulance. which in reality was a little more than a wooden handcart. Her clothing was soaked with blood. As they did so, they noticed that the back of the woman's clothing was soaked with blood, which he presumed had run down from the neck wound. He also observed a mass of congested blood underneath the body, which was around 6 inches in diameter and which had begun to run towards the gutter. A relatively small amount of blood found at the scene, coupled with the fact that no one in the proximity had heard a sound, would by the end of the day lead to speculation that the murder had been carried out elsewhere and the body simply dumped where it was found. So, as the Times informed its readers, it seems difficult to believe that a woman received her death wounds there. If the woman was murdered on the spot where the body was found, it is impossible to believe that she could not have aroused the neighbourhood by her screams. Bucks Row being a street tenanted all the way down one side by a respectable class of people. This theory was given some consideration and subsequently inquest into the woman's death, but the coroner was quick to dismiss it, and it was his summings up is the condition of the body appeared to prove conclusively that the deceased was killed on the exact spot at which she was found. There was no trace of evidence. There was not a trace of blood anywhere except that at the spot where her neck was lying. This circumstance being significant to justify the assumption that the injuries to the throat were committed when the woman was on the ground, whilst the state of her clothing had sustained of any of the blood about her legs, suggesting that the abdominal injuries were inflicted while she was still in the same position. Okay. Evidently, most of the blood had been absorbed into the clothing, and a fact that was all too apparent to PC Thane, whose hands became covered in the stuff as he lifted her into the ambulance. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm all over the place. I promise when I do part 2 to this one, it won't be as bad. And I put that in upside down. Where am I? At 4:30 a.m, Inspector Sprawling was on Hackney Road when word reached him that the body had been found in Bucks Row. He hurried to the scene of the crime, where he found one of the residents washing the blood away. He was informed the body had been moved to the mortuary. Spratling headed round to the mortuary in nearby. Sorry, guys, I don't know what's going on today. I need to sort myself out here. Sorry, let's try that sentence again. Spratling headed around to the mortuary in the nearby Old Montague Street, which was reality little more than a brick shed. There he began taking down a description of the deceased. At first he noticed only the neck wounds previously noted by Dr. Llewellyn, but on closer inspection he discovered something that had so far eluded everyone. Beneath her blood-stained clothing, a deep gash ran all the way along the woman's abdomen. She had been disemboweled. Spratling sent immediately for Dr. Llewellyn in order that he might comment on the newly discovered injuries, but before the medic had arrived and could carry out a more detailed inspection, two senile workhouse people, Robert Mann and James Hatfield, stripped the body of its clothing and proceeded to wash it down, dumping the garments into an untidy pile in the mortuary yard. The coroner would later criticise the police for allowing this to happen, whereas the police were adamant that they had given instructions that the body was not to be disturbed until Llewellyn had conducted a full and detailed post-mortem examination. So, from what I'm hearing, or reading, hearing myself say, but reading, is that twice they did this now. someone's come along and just cleaned up, and the same guy, he cleaned both bodies, or had both bodies cleaned at the time of their arrival. Okay. Where am I? The first problem to confront the police as they launched their investigation into Bucks Row murder was identifying the victim. The body was therefore photographed, and copies of the photograph were shown around the district by police officers who were conducting the investigation. Her clothes was, so Lloyd's weekly newspaper later reported, of a common description. The only articles in the pockets were the only thing she had in her pockets was a comb and a piece of looking glass. This led the police to conclude that the murdered woman was an inhabitant of numerous lodging houses of the neighbourhood, and the officers were dispatched to make inquiries at each of these establishments. As the news of the murder spread, this is a quote from the newspaper. As news of the murder spread, first one woman, then another came forward to view the body. And at length it was found the woman answering the description of the murdered woman had lodged in a common lodging house at 18 Thrall Street. Women from the place were fetched to identify the deceased as Polly, who had shared a room with three other women in the place on the usual terms of such houses, nightly permanent of 4D. I'm guessing that would be basically like 4 pence or something. Each woman having a separate bed. Polly, so they've not even her name. Meanwhile, Inspector Spratling had noticed that the skirt of one petticoat and the band of another article of clothing bore a stencil stamp of Lambeth Workhouse. The detectives were immediately dispatched there to get the matron to view the body and see if she could identify the victim. She couldn't do so and stated that clothing might have been issued during the past 2 or 3 years. Oh, it has a picture of the house. Nice. Mary Ann Monk, it says. However, further inquiries led the police to Mary Ann Monk, with whom Mary Nicholas had struck up a friendship with during her most recent stay at the workhouse in April and May. On the evening of her murder, Mary Ann Monk was taken to the mortuary and, having twice viewed the body, identified her as Mary Ann Nicholas, also known as Polly Nicholas. Okay, that makes sense now. Acting on information provided by Mary Ann Monk, the police were then able to trace Edward Walker on Saturday, 1st of September 1888. He was taken to the mortuary where he formally identified the body as being that of his daughter, Mary Ann Nicholas. The inquest opens. On the afternoon of Saturday, on the 1st of September 1888, at the Working Lads Institute on Whitechapel Road, Wayne Edwin Baxter, the coroner for South East Middlesex, opened the inquest into the death of Mary Ann Nicholas. The first witness was her father, Edward Walker, who confirmed that the victim was his daughter, Mary Ann Nicholas, and then went on to give details of her life. He was followed by Police Constable John Neal, who testified to having found the body in Bucks Row. The final witness of the day was Dr. Ralph Rees Llewellyn, who outlined the horrendous injuries that the victim had suffered. At the conclusion of the doctor's evidence, the coroner adjourned the inquiry for 2 days. Okay. So there's another quote. It says, her eldest son views the body. Last evening, after the inquest on Mary Ann Nicholas, the eldest son of the deceased woman arrived at the Whitechapel mortuary and recognised the body as that of his mother. He was respectably dressed and seemed much affected at her untimely end. He is by trade an engineer and lives with his grandfather, Mr. Walker, but for some time had not been on speaking terms with his father. Okay. William Nicholas arrives. An hour later, William Nicholas arrived to the mortuary to view the body of his estranged wife. Well, I don't understand how you can say estranged when you knew where she was. And it was evident to those present that there was issues between William and his eldest son. When the meeting between the father and son took place, neither of them spoke to each other until the deceased's father said to Mr. Nicholas, "Well, here is your son, you see. I have taken care of him and made a man of him." The father then spoke to him and said, "Well, I really did not know him. He has so grown and altered." Okay. As in changed. He altered, he changed. William then went to the mortuary to see if he recognised the deceased as his estranged wife. Greatly affected by the sight that greeted him, he was reported to have exclaimed, "I forgive you as you are what you have been to me." According to the newspaper, he came out ashy white and simply said, "Well, there is no mistake about it. It has come to a sad end at last." Wow. The funeral of Mary Nicholas. Thursday the 6th of September, 1888, Mary Nicholas's body was removed from the mortuary on Thursday the 6th of September, and was taken to the undertaker in Hadbury Street. The undertaker is kind of like the funeral home, if you didn't know that already. Great secrecy was maintained concerning the arrangement of her funeral, which took place later that same day in order to keep the curious crowds at bay. However, things did not quite go according to plan, as due to the late arrival of the mourners, news of the impending funeral spread around the neighbourhood and people began to make their way to Hadbury Street in order to view the coffin and read the inscription on the plate. The Morning Advisor carried out a full report on the funeral on its edition of Friday the 7th of September. This is the quote from that. "The funeral of the unfortunate woman, Mary Ann Nicholas, who was murdered in Bucks Row early on Friday last, took place yesterday. The arrangements were of a very simple character. The time at which the cortege was to start was kept. So the time it was meant to start was kept a secret, and a ruse was perpetrated in order to get the body out of the mortuary where it was lain since the day of the murder. A pair of horsed-closed hearses was observed making its way down Hadbury Street, and the crowds, which numbered some thousands, made their way for it to go along Old. Made way for it to go along Old Montague Street. Okay, but instead of doing so, it passed onto Whitechapel Road and double back, entering the mortuary by the back gate, which is situated in Chapman's Court. No one was near besides the undertaker and his men when the remains placed in the polished elm coffin bearing the plate with the inscription Mary Ann Nicholas, aged 42, died August 31st, 1888. Oh, so she was 42 when she died. Was removed to the hearse and driven to Hadbury Street, where there to await the mourners. These were late in arriving, and the two coaches were kept awaiting some time in the side street. By this time the news had spread that the body was in the hearse, and people flocked around to see the coffin and examine the plate. In this they were, however, frustrated for a body of police under Inspector Helson of the H Division surrounding the hearse and prevented their approaching too near. At last, the procession started towards Ilford, where the last scene in this unfortunate drama took place. Sorry. The mourners were Mr. Edward Walker, father of the victim, and 2 of her children. The procession proceeded along Baker's Row and past the corner of Bucks Row into the main road, where policemen were stationed every few yards. The houses in the neighbourhood had their blinds drawn, and much sympathy was expressed for the relatives. That was the quote. Sorry that it took me so long to get through it. There was a strange coincidence about the funeral of Mary Nicholas. Okay. As mentioned in the Morning Advisor article, her body was removed from the mortuary via the back gate, which was located in Chapman's Court. From there, the coffin was taken to the undertaker's premises, which were suited in Hadbury Street. So, Hadbury Street, that's where the other lady was found, right? Yeah, Annie Chapman. 2 days later, on the 8th of September, Jack the Ripper would claim the life of his next victim, Annie Chapman, whose body would be found in the backyard of a house in Hadbury Street. Yeah, see, I connected the dots. Mary Nicholas was buried in the City of London Cemetery, Aldersbrook Road, Manor Park, London. Although her final resting place no longer exists, the cemetery authorities do maintain a memorial plaque for her in the cemetery's garden of remembrance, to which a regular stream of visitors make their way each year to pay their respects and spend a few moments in quiet. Many of the visitors leave flowers and coins on the plaque. The coins are presumably in remembrance of the fact that she lacked the 4 pence for her bed on the day of her murder, and in doing so they ensure that Mary Nicholas, murdered on August the 31st, 1888, is not forgotten. So I'll leave that there for you guys because it's over an hour, and I will I will then come back again and do part 2 for you at another time when I am not yeah, because we have 3 more victims from that, and then there are some other crimes, and then we'll go into the next part and then carry on from there. So thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you liked this video, although I didn't get much done on diamond painting. I do still hope you enjoyed watching and listening to me. Let me know what you think, and I'll speak to you all soon. Goodbye, everyone.